You keep choosing the same kind of woman with a different face, same chaos. You call it a pattern, an unlucky streak, bad timing. But here's the real truth. You're not choosing her, you're choosing your wound. In the next 12 minutes or so, I'll show you how that unconscious story that picks her, why it feels familiar, and 3 practical ways to break the loop, even if you've been doing this your whole life. Remember, you're not choosing her, you're choosing your wound. So if you wonder why your relationships follow the same script, this episode is for you. I've been working with men for over 10 years, and relationships and dating is a really common thing that brings men to therapy. Either they find themselves in the same relationship over and over and over again, or they have complete unluck with getting a relationship, right? Or they are coming from a divorce and they're wondering, okay, what went wrong here? But what I found with a lot of guys is if you don't do this deeper work, you're going to end up dating the same person with the same patterns and the same pain because you're not choosing her, you're choosing your wound. So let's talk about that. Humans repeat what's familiar. The brain is really dumb. It doesn't really know the difference between good and bad. All it knows is comfortable and uncomfortable. So it's going to choose something that's comfortable for us, even if it's bad or painful, because the brain only really cares about survival. So even though you might be suffering, in these relationship patterns, because you literally did not die, your brain's going to be like, okay, let's just do that again and again. Whereas something that's new, even though it's better for you, like dating someone else or trying out a new relationship skill, it's uncomfortable, it's scary, it's new, it's novel. Your brain is going to move away from the unknown and towards the known. Let's go a little bit deeper. So there's a famous psychologist called John Bowlby who studied attachment styles. Basically, what he did is he watched how kids dealt with the fact of their parent leaving. And depending on how they left a room, whether they, cried and screamed, or they ignored the problem, or they tried to cling on to the parent, there's a bunch of different things that he watched for, but it had these different attachment styles. And these things are unconscious, right? They're hardwired, programmed into us. Our parents and our upbringing and our culture play a huge role in this, but these kind of get formed in the first, call it 5 years of life, and they play out over and over and over again. So we're going to talk more about that as we keep going, but you're going to find, especially as you get older, that you end up dating people that have a similar or a compatible attachment style to yours. And it takes a lot of work to rewire this. Again, therapy is a great place to start to do that. But if you don't work on this stuff, you're going to find yourself attaching to the same people over and over and over again. Another thing that happens that kind of backs this up is the idea of a repetition compulsion. I studied psychoanalysis for years, and I like kind of this idea where you're kind of compelled to repeat the past over and over again, trying to look for a different solution, right? We do things that are familiar, like I said, over and over, and we're trying to see if it's going to resolve in a different way, because that's the way that we can kind of come to a sense of closure, not just about the current situation, but about past situations. So when I get to a client example, we're going to talk about that directly. But let's go back to this attachment idea. So if you grew up with, inconsistent caregiving, right? If your parent was, very hot and cold, right? Say they, when they were there, they were very loving, they were very attentive, but then they would leave suddenly without warning. Maybe they would leave physically for a job, a demanding job, or they leave emotionally through something like drugs and alcohol or their own mental health issues. If you do that, you're going to end up with an anxious attachment style where you're constantly pinging and checking to see if that person still loves you, right, and still connected to you. For those guys out there, you know this is you if you find yourself texting whoever you're in a relationship with over and over again. If you have a constant need for validation, if you are never feel quite secure, you feel like this person could leave you or cheat on you in any possible moment. That's an anxious attachment style. Another one is an avoidant attachment style. So the kids in this example, when the parent left, the kid just ignored the fact that it was happening. They would go and play with themselves. They would just, go off into a corner and entertain themselves. And the idea here is because the parent left over and over again, the kid kind of shut down their needs and determined the fact that they don't need anybody anymore, right? They were saying, hey, if this person's not going to be here for me, then I don't need anybody in my life. And you're probably going to hear some of that. That's going to be very common for you if you're a guy that tends to be very, avoidant, that tends to be dismissive in a relationship, that tries to minimize things, that shuts down maybe through your own drug and alcohol use or screens, TV, things like that. That's an avoidant attachment. We prefer to avoid conflict. And the one that you're hoping to get is secure, which is the idea that, your partner can come and go, you can deal with conflict, you can go through a bunch of different things, different problems, but no matter what, you still feel attached to that person. Now, when we're growing up in a relationship, and we're trying to date as adults, you're going to find that you're going to partner with people that either share your attachment or have a comparable unhealthy one. So if you're an anxious person or you're that checking person, you might find yourself drawn to avoidant women or avoidant people, right? Because you're just wanting, because it's going to like trigger that pattern in you, right? If the person is leaving and dismissing, then the idea is that you're going to want to check more, and that checking, that being in that anxiety is actually comfortable for you. Again, even though it's painful, it's known, and the brain would rather do a known pattern than flex into something that's healthier, that secure attachment, than not. So another thing that's really common when you fall into these kind of repetitive bad relationships is projection. And what projection is basically is, from a psychoanalytic lens, it's the idea that you are taking part of yourself, right? Maybe it's a characteristic that you wish you had, or that you wish you didn't have, and you're putting it on to somebody else. So a really common example of this is, a guy who is very shut down romantically or sexually. He might find himself dating a highly sexual woman, and sometimes a highly chaotic woman, because he doesn't have access to that in himself. So he's going to find partners that bring that out in him, right? That kind of embody that fault, or that sense of repression in himself. Also, if you have somebody who is very even keeled and can't, let themselves have any fun, they might find themselves dating somebody who is very chaotic, right? Who, can't take life seriously, or who, is partying all the time. And these things, doesn't go without saying, it's obviously a bad partnership, right? It's going to lead to a lot of drama, a lot of conflict, but it's mainly because the person hasn't embodied those things themselves. They haven't really brought those parts of themselves online, that they find themselves seeking it in other people. And you don't have to say it, but I will. It's not about that other person, right? It's about something that you're lacking in yourself. So the last one I want to talk about is a really common pattern, I think, especially with a lot of the men that end up in therapy. We talk about them a lot on the show. It's the nice guys, right? This is a rescue and validation loop. A lot of men that, either grew up in that rescuer, golden child role. Maybe they were a parentified child, right? They were taking care of their parents in one way or another. They've learned to get validation for rescuing people, for being the savior, for fixing things, for being the one with the answers. And again, there's nothing wrong with like fixing stuff and being valuable, but if that's the only way that you feel love, you're going to find yourself, attracted to broken people, right? You're going to be attracted to people that need saving, and not only need saving, right? Because everyone goes through tough stuff, but that are not really interested in getting better because they're in that constant victim role. So you're constantly trying to save them. They're constantly being a victim, and it just doesn't work out. You end up being very frustrated, often feel drained, and then you divorce, and boom, you're working with MTO, a couple months later. So hopefully there's some examples where if you're following along, it's not even about the partner, right? It's all about you and your wound. So you're not choosing her. You're not even aware of who she is. You're choosing your wound. And this is the wound talking, right? It's not you in control, it's your unconscious. And doing something like therapy is a great way to start to unwind that, and figure out who you really are, so you can date somebody who's actually good for you. So let's just do a quick case vignette. This is obviously composite client, not a real person, but just kind of a typical guy who comes through MTO. So you have a client here who is kind of dating that emotionally unavailable person, right? It's that person who never quite has time for them. They say they're committed, they say the right things. Maybe they even text well, but they never really prioritize them. You find that this person kind of always tends to be a little bit too busy. They cancel on you quite a bit. They, take phone calls during your dates. Maybe they're on their phone. They're just like not really there. And, you look at it from the outside in, you'd be like, why would you date this person? This person doesn't seem like they're interested in you at all. But when I dug deeper into this client's history, I found that they had an emotionally avoidant parent. For this argument, we'll just say it's their father, right? Say their father was, working all the time, was never really giving them the time of day, was always distracted with one project or one hobby or another or something, and just wasn't able to give the child the attention that they deserve and that they need. So the kid learned to be very entertaining, right? Learn to be the class clown, learn to try to make the father laugh or be proud of him or, you know, um, impress him in one way or another. And it would work briefly. The dad would give, a couple compliments here and there, show up to a couple baseball games, that kind of thing, but never really, really told the kid how proud he was of them. So, if this is your story, you end up growing up being a really good entertainer and really good at trying to elicit attention. But then you also find people that are the same as your father, that are very avoidant, because when we talk about that repetition compulsion, to bring it back around, there's a part of the brain that wants to complete the loop. So if you think about that kid, right? If that kid finally got the attention that he deserved, that would feel incredible, right? That would cause so much psychic relief that it'd be an apex experience. So what the brain tries to do is it tries to find people that are similar to try to get that apex experience. It's going to find unavailable people, run the same program, and hope that it comes out differently. The hard truth is that it doesn't. If a person is not very present with you, it's not really about you. It's about them and about their, ability to tolerate emotions or whatever they're struggling with. But if you're stuck in this loop, you're going to be constantly doing the same thing over and over again, hoping that it turns out differently. And again, that's the wound taking control. That's the wound taking control, and it's not about the other person. It's about you trying to heal your childhood through them. So again, right, you're not really choosing her, you're choosing the wound. So, now I want to talk about a little bit about, okay, how do you find the right person? All the stuff we've been talking about before, psychoanalysis has a wonderful name for it. They call it the passionate bad fit. And passion is the key word here, because when you're dating from your wounded place, it's going to feel incredible, right? It's like very emotionally stimulating, right? It's, pushing all those buttons. You're getting all these like crazy memories and all this childhood stuff that we've been talking about. Your attachment style is stimulated, right? You are like really, really into it. In fact, that kind of obsession, infatuation is often a case of your wound running the show. It's not really a good fit. So when you're dating someone that is a good fit for you, it's going to feel kind of boring. It's going to feel kind of dead, especially if you're used to chaotic relationships. But what it is that it's safe, right? It's safe, it's secure, it's not a lot of drama. And I'll tell you, it takes a lot of guys years to try to ratchet down their kind of stimulation, their dopamine system, to be able to even just tolerate being in a safe relationship. It can feel boring, it can feel lame, it can't feel sexually exciting. It takes a while to kind of reprogram yourself. So now that we have this a little bit mapped up, here's the question of what do you do about it? So there's kind of three steps that you can do. The first thing, and this is, where everything starts, especially in this kind of self-improvement therapy work, is you got to map the pattern. You got to start to name what it is that is driving you, right? Understand your wound, understand how it's picking your relationship partners, and then you can go from there. Of course, therapy is the best place to try to figure this stuff out, but there's also tons of content, right? We got a lot on menstherapy.online. There's coaching. Even a really good friend could maybe help you with this, but really it involves a lot of vulnerability, because to understand your wound, you have to understand yourself. You have to go back into the past and understand how you got to become who you are. And that means taking an objective look at your upbringing. It means looking at, how you grew up, how your parents treated you, what your early friendships and relationships were like. It's really taking a massive inventory of how you learned what love even is. And if you do that, you're going to find that you learned this particular thing. And often it comes with a lot of pain. And it's not to say that your parents messed you up, right? It's like everything's imperfect and we only learn one option instead of learning all the different options that things can be. So why does this help? It turns an unconscious pattern into a conscious map. And with that map, you can start to chart out a different direction. If you can name it, you can come up with a cool metaphor for it or some kind of shorthand. You can name when that thing comes up. So let's just take a moment. I'd encourage you to do it right now. Write down a one sentence pattern for your last relationship. Take the time, do it. I'll wait right here. Write down what you think happened, right? What played out? What did you do? What did they do? What was the overarching pattern? And if you feel so inclined, go back through your relationship history and see if this starts to make sense. If you start to see repeating patterns over and over again. So the next thing that you do, right, once you've had that awareness piece, then you got to do something about it, right? Now you have to interrupt these loops as they're happening. So when you find yourself compelled, right, driven by emotion, driven by passion, ask yourself, is this me or is this my wound right now? Am I really feeling romance, or am I acting from a place of hurt? So take that moment, ask the question, and then do something else, right? Do literally anything else. Um, a really common thing when you're working from your wound here is that relationships are going to accelerate really quickly. You might end up saying, I love you in the first month or two, right? You're going to end up wanting to move in right away. You're going to have sex really fast because it's very familiar to you, right? So one way is to start to work on this is to slow things down. You can say something like, hey, I really care about you, but I'm not that ready to move fast. I need some time. I need to see consistency. You can ask for that in a relationship. Right? You can create some distance and you can give your adult brain some space to decide what this person is and if they're a good fit before just going ahead and jumping in. So remember, you want to pause, see if it's your wound, and then try something different. And the last thing, if you use enough, over time, you're going to start to build a new template. You're going to build a relationship based on things like stability, right, reciprocity, mutual care and respect, and these many, many small, repeatable choices that show that this person is a good partner for you. We're talking about somebody who, keeps their plans, who doesn't want to be rescued, actually, right? Who is very consistent, who keeps their promises to you, who is able to take and receive feedback so that you can grow as a couple, right? Especially if you're looking at marriage or kids, right? The ability to go through hard things trumps everything, right? That is really the main thing here. So what you can do is you can start to find a new template and you can start to screen for different things in a partner. I'll tell you, especially now I have a kid on the way. You have this idea where fun is not the most important thing. It's still important, but what is important is resolving conflict, creating security, being a team, right? Those things become more important as you start to consider a family. So in order to keep this alive, you can do things like sign up for therapy, right? You can join one of our men's groups. You can set boundaries in your relationship. You can write down some of these filters or some of these patterns and try to stop yourself when you find yourself doing them. Put reminders into your phone, right? Really take this seriously. Who your life partner is perhaps one of, if not the most important choice in your life. So it's worth really investing in to make sure you get this one right. So, let's do, as we're wrapping up here, a kind of a micro challenge. I'm challenging you right now, listening to this video, to map out your pattern, right? Do that first step. Figure out what that pattern is for you. Figure out how to distill it. You can come into our Slack channel and talk to me about directly. You can talk to ChatGPT, right? You can try to figure out, okay, what is my pattern? And then try to pause when you see that coming up. Right? Try to pause and think about how you might do something differently. And if you do this, comment on the video, right? Again, join our Slack channel. It's 100% totally free. Message me. You can contact me, Marc at menstherapy.online. Let me know how it goes. I want to help you, right? So let me know how this thing goes. And I just want to leave you with one thing, which is, you're not broken, right? Your parents didn't destroy you. You're just patterned. You're conditioned. And they're learned when you're a kid, you repeat them tons and tons of times. But the most important thing is that they can be unlearned. It takes work. It might take months, if not years, but you have the power to control and change your life dramatically. So, if you like this episode, do all the social stuff, right? Share it with somebody who's stuck in a loop, maybe that friend who's been dating the same person over and over again. Um, you know, do that kind of thing. Share it, like, subscribe, do all that. It really does help. And remember, you're not choosing her, you're choosing your wound. So name it when you see it, stop the script, and choose differently.